I was 24, living in Oakland, and trying to figure out my next move, when an older couple I'd met at a work conference offered me 2 weeks in their beautiful California home in exchange for watching their 2 cats. It felt like a dream scenario. They were going to Hawaii. I was getting a free vacation. They showed me around, introduced me to the cats, one friendly, one so shy I didn't see her the entire first day, and then I dropped them at the airport. For the first few days, it was perfect. I hiked Mount Diablo in the mornings and explored San Francisco in the afternoons. But on the 5th day, everything shifted. I got back to the house around dusk. As I put my key in the lock, a wave of physical nausea hit me. It wasn't a thought, it was a biological reaction. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me not to go inside. I forced myself to ignore it, chalking it up to exhaustion, and pushed the door open. That night, the shy cat, the one who never left the master bedroom, was hiding under my bed, crying. She wouldn't let me touch her, but she refused to leave my room. I locked my door before I went to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps crunching in the gravel outside my window. I lay there, barely breathing, until the sound faded. The next afternoon, I came back from a music festival in Sonoma. I put my key in the door, turned it, and pushed. It didn't open. The deadbolt was locked. My key only worked on the bottom lock. The owners had explicitly told me they never used the deadbolt. I had to dig up a hider key buried a foot deep under a bush just to get inside. I convinced myself I was just being paranoid, that maybe I had somehow locked it myself without realizing. But the next day, it happened again. I stepped into the garage to grab a drink from the spare fridge. When I turned around to go back inside, the door connecting the garage to the house was shut and locked. By the 7th day, the feeling of being watched was so oppressive I couldn't breathe properly. I felt physically ill. I decided to run to the grocery store just to escape the house. As the cashier handed me my receipt and said, "Have a great evening," I burst into tears. An intrusive thought had just flashed through my mind. You might be the last person to ever say that to me. I sat in my car in the driveway for 30 minutes, trying to force myself to go inside. I couldn't do it. Finally, I came up with a plan. I unlocked the front door, stood in the entryway, and yelled down the hall, "I've already called the police. They're almost here. If you want to avoid being arrested, you need to leave now." The second the words left my mouth, the light in the master bedroom flicked on. Then, the heavy thud of footsteps. I ran. I sprinted to my car, locked the doors, and called 911, having a full mental breakdown on the phone. When the police arrived, they cleared the house. They didn't find anyone, but the double doors leading from the master bedroom to the garden were wide open, and in the corner of the room, hidden behind the blinds, was a pile of food wrappers. The house was built in an L shape. From the master bedroom windows, you had a perfect, unobstructed view directly into the living room, where I had been sitting every night. The police said there were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. Whoever it was hadn't broken in to rob the place. They had been living in the master bedroom for at least 3 days, watching me. And the only reason the shy cat had come to my room was because she was forced to choose between 2 strangers in her house. And she decided I was the safer option. I dog sit for a wealthy couple who live out in BFE, bumfuck Egypt. It's a massive property, completely isolated, surrounded by thick woods. They pay incredibly well, mostly because their nearest neighbor, a guy named Steve, is known to be unstable. The house doesn't have a front door, just a side door and a back door, both hidden from the main road by a wall of massive privacy trees. You have to physically come onto the property to see the entrances. It was my first night there. I was unloading my car around 6 p.m. when I heard gravel crunching behind me. I turned around. Steve was standing at the edge of the driveway. He was wearing dirty jeans, a red hoodie, and a Confederate flag hat. His hair was shoulder length and greasy. He took a single step forward. "You all right?" he asked, his voice weirdly flat. The dogs, who were usually incredibly friendly, instantly went rigid. They started low growling, the hair on their backs standing up. I had never seen them react like that. "Yeah, I'm good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just dog sitting for the week. How about you?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me in total silence for a full minute. Finally, I turned back to my trunk to grab my last bag. As soon as I looked away, I heard him take another step closer. The dogs barked viciously. "I know them," Steve said. "Them dogs won't do nothing to me." I told him I was going inside and wished him a good night. I locked the door behind me, but when I looked out the window 10 minutes later, he was still standing in the exact same spot, staring at the house. Around 8 p.m., the sun was starting to set. I was on the couch playing video games when the dogs absolutely lost their minds, rushing the back door, snarling and snapping at the wood. I grabbed my knife and crept to the window. Steve had pulled his moped into the driveway and parked it behind my car to hide it. He was crouched down, peering into my car windows. He would take one step, look in the car, then look at the house. Take another step, look in the car, look at the house. I texted the homeowners. Their response chilled me. "Call the cops if you feel unsafe. They know him. We think he had a psychotic break recently." I turned off all the lights in the house so he couldn't see me watching him. By 8:30, he had moved from the car to the walkway. He was 30 feet from the back door, just standing in the dark, talking to himself. I called 911. Because of the rural location, the dispatcher told me it would take a while for a deputy to arrive. She told me to turn all the lights on. I refused. I told her I was armed, the doors were locked, and if he came inside, I was going to shoot him. By 9 p.m., it was fully dark. The dogs went crazy again. I couldn't see Steve from the kitchen window anymore, so I crept upstairs and looked down from the bathroom window. Steve was standing on the wooden back porch. He was lighting matches and dropping them onto the dry wood. He was twisting his head back and forth, arguing with someone who wasn't there. Then he stepped up to the door and started pounding on it with both fists. I raised my gun, my heart beating so fast, my chest physically hurt. I was preparing myself to take a human life. Suddenly, he stopped. He turned, sprinted to his moped and tore off down the driveway. Less than a minute later, a deputy pulled in. I went outside to meet the officer. He was dismissive, treating it like a nuisance call. "Yeah, I think I passed him on the road," he said casually. He asked if I was staying the night. I told him absolutely not. I was packing my things and taking the dogs with me. I called my dad to come help me pack. While we were loading the car, my dad walked the perimeter of the yard to make sure it was clear. I was standing by the front window watching him. That's when I saw Steve again. He was standing at the very edge of the tree line, holding a 24-pack of beer, watching the house. He had come back. But the moment he saw my dad, a large, older man, step into the light, Steve turned around and melted back into the woods. He wasn't having a psychotic break. He wasn't out of his mind. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he only retreated when he realized I wasn't alone anymore. I was pet sitting for a friend who lived in a relatively nice apartment complex in downtown Memphis. It was the weekend after my birthday, and I was looking forward to a quiet mini vacation in a place I had all to myself. It was my first night there. I had just gotten back from a family dinner around 10 p.m. The dogs were asleep in the master bedroom on the other side of the apartment. I was sitting in the living room, watching Netflix. The front door was right next to the TV, and the guest bathroom was just a few feet down the hall. I paused my show to use the restroom. I stepped inside, shut the door, and sat down. The apartment was dead silent, and then I heard it. The distinct click of the front door unlocking. I froze. I have a history of dealing with stalkers, so my dad taught me from a young age to be hyper-vigilant about security. The very first thing I did when I arrived at the apartment was check every window and engage every lock on the front door. I knew it was locked, but I heard the heavy door swing open. Then the sound of boots stepping onto the laminate flooring. If you've ever lived in an apartment with laminate, you know exactly how loud and distinct that sound is. Someone was inside. I pulled my phone out of my pocket with shaking hands and frantically texted my mum to call the police, terrified that if I spoke, the intruder would hear me. The bathroom door was hollow core wood. It wouldn't stop anyone who wanted to get in. My mum didn't answer. The footsteps moved slowly from the entryway into the living room. Then a man coughed, a deep, wet, unmistakable human cough. He was maybe 15 feet away from the bathroom door. Panic took over. I dialed 911 myself, sobbing as quietly as I could while sitting on the toilet seat, begging the dispatcher to send someone before I became a statistic. I could hear the man moving around the living room, his boots scuffing against the floorboards. Then the footsteps changed direction. They moved away from the bathroom, down the hall, and toward the back of the apartment. A few seconds later, I heard the back door open and close. The dispatcher told me the police had arrived, but I had to come out and unlock the front door to let them in. Unlocking that bathroom door, sprinting down the hallway, and throwing open the front door was the most terrifying 10 seconds of my life. I practically fell out into the hallway. The police cleared the apartment. They didn't find anyone. And worse, they didn't believe me. They pointed out that the back door was the kind with a push-button lock on the knob. You could push the button, step outside, and pull the door shut behind you, and it would lock automatically. Because the apartment was secure when they arrived, they assumed I had just gotten spooked by ambient building noise. I slept for maybe 45 minutes that night, with a kitchen knife under my pillow. The next morning, my friend texted me to ask how the first night went. I didn't want to freak her out, but I asked her casually if anyone else had a key to the apartment. Maintenance, a landlord, an ex-boyfriend? No, she replied, just me. Why? I told her what happened. She called me immediately, her voice shaking. She told me that a few weeks prior, she had lost her spare set of keys somewhere between her car and the front door. She had assumed they fell down a storm drain. The police thought I was crazy because there was no sign of forced entry. But there didn't need to be. The man who walked into the apartment that night didn't pick the lock. He used a key, and he only left because he heard me whispering to the 911 dispatcher through the thin bathroom door.